The bakery was quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Sophie's hands trembled as she reached for the last tray of pastries, her movements slow, deliberate. But as she bent down to grab it, her eyes met his. Adam's gaze steady and intense. For a split second, the world around them seemed to fade. There was no bakery, no work to be done, just the two of them standing in the charged silence. "Sophie," Adam's voice broke the stillness, low and laced with something she couldn't quite place. "Are you really okay?" Sophie hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say something, to brush it off, to tell him she was fine, but the truth was she wasn't sure anymore. Everything was changing, and she didn't know if she could handle it. She swallowed hard, stepping back, her gaze never leaving his. "I don't know, Adam," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of the unspoken words hanging between them. "I'm scared." Welcome to my channel. Press number 1 if you're ready to dive into the story, and hit the like button if you're not ready to start. Sit back and join me on this emotional roller coaster. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Let's get started. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the bustling streets of the small town. Adam, a 24-year-old mechanic with a rough exterior and a quick smile, revved the engine of his beat-up pickup truck as he pulled into the small bakery at the corner of Elm Street. His broad shoulders and strong arms were visible under his tight t-shirt, muscles flexing as he turned the wheel. He had just finished a long day of repairs, his body drenched in sweat, his shirt sticking to his chest. As he stepped out of the truck, his eyes immediately found her. Sophie, the bakery owner, was busy kneading dough behind the counter. She had curves in all the right places, her hips swaying slightly as she moved, and her long legs, encased in tight black leggings, stretched elegantly beneath the counter. Her brown eyes met his, and she flashed a smile that made Adam's heart skip a beat. Sophie was in her early 30s, but there was a softness in her appearance, a graceful maturity that drew Adam in. Sophie wiped her hands on her apron, her toned arms flexing as she moved to the counter to greet him. Her low-cut top revealed a glimpse of her smooth, sun-kissed skin, and Adam couldn't help but notice the way her body moved with an effortless grace. "Hey Adam," Sophie said, her voice soft with a playful lilt. "Got room for some fresh pastries today?" Adam grinned, a little embarrassed but excited. "I'll take 2, he said, his eyes lingering on her for a moment too long. His gaze moved from her lips to the curve of her neck, and he felt a heat rise in his chest. Sophie noticed the way he looked at her, but she didn't call him out on it. Instead, she winked and handed him the warm pastries. Adam sat at one of the small tables in the corner, Sophie joining him with a cup of coffee. As she sat across from him, her posture relaxed, she leaned forward slightly, causing the neckline of her top to dip just enough for Adam to see a hint of the smooth skin on her chest. He couldn't help but admire her, and his mind raced with thoughts that he wasn't ready to voice. Sophie looked at him with a knowing smile. "So Adam, how's life outside the garage?" she asked, taking a sip of her coffee, her lips pressing softly against the rim of the cup. Adam tried to focus, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her, the way her lips moved when she spoke, the way the coffee slid down her throat. "Busy as usual," Adam replied, forcing himself to stay focused. But when Sophie leaned back, stretching slightly, her top clinging to her curves, Adam couldn't help but stare. The way her body seemed to fill the space around her made it hard to look away. Sophie noticed his gaze, and her smile turned a little more playful. "Careful there, Adam," she teased. "You're staring." Adam's face flushed, and he cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Sorry. You're really stunning." Sophie chuckled, leaning in closer. "Don't worry, I'm used to it," she said with a wink. But there was something in the way she looked at him now, something that suggested a shift, a mutual understanding that something deeper was beginning to form between them. The next day, Adam arrived at the bakery a little earlier than usual. He didn't have to make any deliveries until later, so he decided to stop by and help Sophie. As he entered, he noticed her moving gracefully behind the counter, her form bending slightly as she reached for a tray of freshly baked bread. Her movements were fluid, each step exuding a quiet confidence that Adam couldn't ignore. "You're up early," Sophie remarked, glancing over her shoulder. The way her long dark hair swayed gently as she turned made Adam's breath catch for a moment. She looked over at him, her brown eyes locking with his, and for a second, neither of them spoke. The air between them seemed to hum with unspoken words. Adam smiled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I thought I'd give you a hand. You look like you've got a lot on your plate this morning." Sophie chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling. She wiped her hands on her apron before walking toward him. "Well, if you're offering," she said, her lips curling into a teasing smile, "there's plenty to do. You can start by organizing the stock in the back." Her voice was warm, but there was an undeniable playful undertone. Adam nodded, eager to help. As he moved toward the back of the bakery, he caught another glimpse of Sophie. Her tight-fitting apron accentuated her slender waist, and the way her hips swayed with each step sent a rush of heat through him. He quickly turned his gaze away, feeling his cheeks flush slightly. Sophie didn't miss his glance. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of her mouth. She returned to her work, but a thought lingered in her mind. She had always been independent, had always enjoyed the solitude that came with running the bakery, but there was something about Adam that made her feel alive. Later that evening, after the bakery had closed, Adam stayed behind to help Sophie clean up. The quiet of the night enveloped them, the dim light casting soft shadows around the room. As they worked side by side, Sophie's movements seemed slower, more deliberate, and Adam couldn't help but notice the way her curves shifted under her loose-fitting shirt. "You've been working hard today," Adam said softly, his voice almost a whisper as he stood close to her. Sophie looked up, her face flushed from the heat of the kitchen. She smiled, though it was a bit tired. "It's always busy, especially with the new orders coming in." Adam stepped closer, his hand lightly brushing against hers as he reached for a cloth. The simple touch sent a jolt of electricity through him. Sophie froze for a moment, her breath catching, before she casually continued wiping the counter, her movements just a little more hesitant. The air between them thickened, each touch, each glance seeming to carry more weight than before. Adam cleared his throat, feeling the tension rise. "Sophie," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I just want you to know, I really enjoy being here with you." Sophie turned to face him, her eyes softening, and for the first time, Adam saw vulnerability in her gaze. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. "I enjoy being with you too, Adam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to be careful. I'm not sure if I'm ready for this." The next few days were filled with an underlying tension between Adam and Sophie. Every time they shared a glance, it felt like there was something unspoken hanging in the air, a connection that neither of them knew how to fully acknowledge. Sophie still kept a bit of distance, but Adam could tell she was softening. One evening after the bakery had closed, Sophie found herself lingering by the counter, wiping down the surfaces, even though she knew there was nothing left to clean. She had always been independent, but now she found herself looking for reasons to stay in Adam's presence a little longer. Adam noticed this shift. It wasn't obvious, but the small things spoke volumes, the way Sophie would smile when he entered, or how her eyes lingered on him a little longer than necessary. He was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to open up to him. On that particular evening, Adam stayed behind to help Sophie clean up, as usual. The dim light cast a warm glow across the bakery, and the sound of their movements echoed softly in the empty room. Sophie stood at the counter, her back to him, bending down to grab a rag. The way her hips curved, the softness of her figure outlined by her shirt, made Adam's heart race. He walked up behind her, his footsteps muffled by the quiet of the room. As he reached her side, his hand brushed lightly against her arm, the contact electric, almost as if he had touched something forbidden. Sophie's body tensed for a split second, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she straightened up, her breath catching in her throat. I didn't mean to startle you," Adam said, his voice low, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt an overwhelming desire to reach out and pull her closer, but he stayed still, waiting for her to react. Sophie turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, she didn't say anything, the space between them filled with a quiet intensity. Finally, she exhaled, her lips curving into a faint smile. "It's all right, Adam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just not used to this. not used to someone caring. Adam took a step closer, the space between them shrinking with every movement. I care about you, Sophie, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. I've cared for a long time. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, waiting. Sophie's breath caught again, but she didn't pull away this time. Instead, she slowly reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside seemed to stop, leaving only the two of them standing in the warm glow of the bakery, their hands touching for the first time. Sophie's heart was racing, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was something deeper, something she hadn't felt in a long time. I'm scared, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible as she looked up into his eyes. But maybe I'm ready. Adam's heart soared, and without thinking, he pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her close, as if telling her that everything would be all right. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind for both of them. Adam and Sophie found themselves stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking, their hearts racing every time they crossed paths. The connection they shared was undeniable, yet both of them were still hesitant, unsure of how to navigate the space between them. One evening, as the bakery was closing, Adam stayed behind as usual, helping Sophie with the last tasks. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of the town settling into the night. Sophie was leaning over the counter, wiping it down for the last time, her curves accentuated by the simple movement. Adam stood a little too close this time, and he couldn't ignore the way her scent seemed to fill the air. She turned to face him, their proximity now more apparent. The faint smell of cinnamon lingered on her clothes, mixing with the warm scent of freshly baked bread still hanging in the air. Adam could feel the heat radiating from her body, and for a moment, it was as if everything else in the world disappeared. Adam, Sophie said softly, her voice laced with a mixture of uncertainty and desire. I don't want to complicate things, but I can't help how I feel when I'm near you. Her eyes searched his face for a reaction, her breath shallow. Adam stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her chin, tilting her head slightly so their gazes met. Sophie, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, I feel the same way. I've never felt like this before, not with anyone. He brushed a strand of hair away from her face, his fingers grazing her soft skin. Sophie's breath hitched as his touch sent a spark through her body. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the sensation. When she opened them again, she found herself drawn to him, the desire in her eyes unmistakable. I don't know if I can let go of my fears, she admitted softly. Adam placed his other hand on her waist, pulling her gently closer. You don't have to let go of everything, he said quietly, his face just inches from hers. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here no matter what. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, matching the rhythm of his own. Sophie closed the distance between them, her lips brushing against his in a soft, hesitant kiss. It was everything Adam had imagined and more, gentle, tender, yet filled with a hunger neither of them had ever felt before. She pulled back slightly, her chest rising and falling with each breath. I don't want to regret this, she murmured. You won't, Adam replied, his voice firm but soft. I promise you won't regret this, Sophie. Not with me. He kissed her again, this time with more urgency, the heat between them rising, their bodies pressed close together as if they couldn't bear to be apart any longer. This story is about to take a turn. If you're intrigued, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. Your support means the world. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. The kiss deepened, their desire for one another undeniable now. Sophie's hands roamed to his shoulders, feeling the strength in his muscles, and Adam's hand slid down to her hips, pulling her closer. The moment felt endless, as if the entire world had stopped spinning, leaving only the two of them in the quiet, intimate space they had created together. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and lingering touches. Adam and Sophie's connection grew stronger with every glance, every word spoken. But with their growing intimacy came an undercurrent of tension, a feeling that something was just beyond their reach, something neither of them was ready to confront. One evening, as they sat together after closing time, the air between them felt heavier than before. Sophie fiddled with her coffee cup, her fingers lightly tracing the rim. Adam sat across from her, watching her with a quiet intensity, as if waiting for her to say something, anything. "Sophie," Adam said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was full of emotion, but there was a trace of uncertainty in it. "I can't stop thinking about you. I can't deny how I feel anymore." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Sophie looked up, her gaze meeting his. For a moment she said nothing, the weight of his words settling around them. Finally, she exhaled softly and placed the cup down, her fingers lingering on the smooth surface for just a second too long. "I feel the same, Adam," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But there are things I'm not ready to face yet. I don't want to make the same mistakes again." Her eyes welled up slightly, and she quickly looked away, afraid he would see the vulnerability in her gaze. Adam's heart ached as he saw her struggle with her emotions. He stood up and walked over to her side of the table, kneeling down in front of her. "Sophie," he said softly, reaching out to gently lift her chin so that she had to look him in the eyes. "You don't have to carry all of this alone. Whatever happened before, it doesn't define us now. We're not making the same mistakes." Sophie's breath caught in her throat as she met his gaze. For a moment she felt herself wavering. His words were exactly what she needed to hear, but the fear of being hurt again still lingered deep inside her. "I want to believe you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I really do. But I'm scared." Adam's heart swelled with tenderness, and he gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'll never hurt you, Sophie. I promise." He kissed her forehead softly, his lips lingering for a moment before he pulled back, giving her space to breathe. Sophie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. Slowly she reached out, taking his hand in hers. The warmth of his skin against hers was all the reassurance she needed. "Okay," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm ready to take that step." Adam's face lit up with a smile that reached his eyes. He gently pulled her into his arms, wrapping her in a warm embrace. For the first time in a long while, Sophie felt safe. She felt as though the walls she had built around herself were finally coming down, and Adam was there to catch her when she fell. The days following their heartfelt conversation felt different. Adam and Sophie grew closer, their connection stronger than ever. But with that closeness came a new set of challenges. Sophie began to feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't before. Her heart was opening up to Adam, but with that openness came a lingering fear of the unknown. Fear that things might change, fear that she might be hurt again. One afternoon, as the bakery grew quiet after the lunchtime rush, Adam sat at the counter watching Sophie work. She moved gracefully, her long hair cascading over her shoulders as she adjusted the oven temperature. Her focus was intense, but Adam could see the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she worked. "Sophie," Adam called out, his voice soft. "Are you okay?" Sophie froze for a second, as though startled by his voice. She turned slowly, a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady but forced. "Just a little tired, that's all." Adam studied her carefully. He could tell she was holding something back, something she wasn't ready to share. "You don't have to pretend with me, Sophie," he said gently, his voice full of concern. "If something's bothering you, I'm here for you." Sophie hesitated, her gaze flickering to the floor for a moment before meeting his. She took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled, her chest rising and falling with the effort. "It's just," she began, her voice faltering. "I don't want to screw this up, Adam. I've been hurt before, and I'm scared that if I let myself fall too deep, I'll get hurt again." Adam's heart ached at her words. He stepped closer to her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. "You don't have to be scared, Sophie," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to hurt you." Sophie closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. She could feel the warmth of his hands on her skin, the sincerity in his touch. It was hard for her to fully trust again, but something about Adam's presence made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she could let go of the past. Adam gently lifted her chin, bringing her gaze back to his. "Let me show you, Sophie," he whispered. "Let me show you that we can build something real, something beautiful together." He smiled softly, And for the first time in a long while, Sophie felt the weight of her fears begin to lift. The following weeks were a blur of joy and uncertainty. Sophie slowly allowed herself to open up to Adam, sharing pieces of her past, of the pain she had endured. Adam listened patiently, never once judging her, always offering her comfort and reassurance. But just as things seemed to be settling into a rhythm, a storm arrived, not the kind that could be weathered, but the kind that threatened to tear everything apart. Sophie's ex-husband showed up unexpectedly one afternoon, demanding a conversation. Sophie's world, which had been so calm and safe in Adam's arms, suddenly felt like it was crumbling. The day Sophie's ex-husband showed up was the day everything changed. Adam could see the tension in Sophie's body the moment she saw him. Her face went pale and her hands trembled slightly. She had not expected this encounter, and it shook her more than she cared to admit. "Sophie," the man said, his voice low and insistent, "we need to talk. It's about the divorce papers." Sophie's heart sank and she instinctively took a step back, her hand reaching for the counter as if seeking support. Adam stood up immediately, his eyes hardening as he looked at the man. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Sophie looked between Adam and her ex-husband, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't want to bring Adam into this, but she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Adam's gaze was unwavering, and Sophie could see the protective anger simmering in his eyes. "I'm her fiancé," Adam said calmly, stepping closer to Sophie. "And whatever this is about, you need to leave." His voice was steady, but there was a firmness in his words that left no room for argument. Sophie turned to Adam, her eyes filled with gratitude and a touch of awe. She had never seen this side of him before. So calm, so protective. It was the reassurance she needed, the strength she had been longing for. She took a deep breath, feeling Adam's presence beside her as a shield against her past. Her ex-husband glared at them both before turning on his heel and storming out of the bakery. Sophie exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her body relaxing as the tension began to dissipate. Adam stood beside her, not speaking, just offering his silent support. Sophie turned to face him, her eyes welling with tears. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Thank you for being here." Adam reached for her hand, his thumb gently caressing her skin. "I'll always be here, Sophie," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." In the weeks that followed, Sophie's ex-husband didn't return. With the threat of her past behind her, Sophie began to allow herself to fully embrace the love she shared with Adam. She let go of the fear that had haunted her for so long, and for the first time in years she felt free. One evening as they sat in the quiet bakery, Sophie looked over at Adam, her heart full of love. She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I think I'm ready, Adam," she said softly. "I'm ready to start a new chapter. With you." Adam smiled, his eyes filled with warmth and love. "I've been ready," he replied, his voice low and full of affection. "Let's start this new chapter, Sophie. Together." And so they did. Together they built something beautiful, something real. The future, once uncertain and filled with fear, was now full of hope and love. Adam and Sophie had found their way to each other, overcoming the past and embracing a future filled with endless possibilities. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into the emotional journey, don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. Be sure to hit the like button, share the video to help spread the story, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future videos. Your comments and subscriptions are a huge motivation for me to keep creating more exciting and engaging stories. Thank you so much for your support.